Okay, great. Um, so, hi everyone, thanks for joining this webinar. I'll quickly share my screen as well. Um, okay. So, I guess once again, thanks everyone for joining this webinar today. As you all know, in this webinar, we'll be talking about and sharing about this new program that we are partnering with Glific to offer to all the NGOs who are using Glific chatbots. Um, I guess I'll start with a little bit of an introduction about Uloy, because I'm guessing there are people here for whom we might be a new name. So Uloy, we are a team of designers, creatives, and developers who create technology products and solutions for social impact organizations to support them to scale their impact by leveraging knowledge sharing, and knowledge management methods. Um,
In all of that, we'd like to also introduce ourselves first. Sorry.
yeah.
I think we should have done that. We've also assumed that a lot of people out here already know us because we did almost exactly this around a week ago in Goa with some of the organizations that are present here. There was a Glific sprint that was organized by Glific and Tech for Dev. So I'll just quickly introduce myself first before passing it on to Saurav. My name is Samarth. I've been working at Uloy for the last 3 years, mostly with the learning experiences vertical. I mainly work with graphic narratives and content. Saurav?
Yeah, thanks so much. So I am Saurabh. I have a background in product and industrial design. I work at Uloy as a designer and researcher in the strategy and partnerships team. And I guess my role at Uloy specifically has been a lot around learning design and designing game-based experiences. So that's a little bit about us. And so I guess quickly also setting the agenda for today's webinar. So firstly, we'll be, as you all know, we'll be talking about the program that we are offering, creating learning experiences using Glific Chatbot. So what does the program structure look like? What are the formats that we'll be following, stuff like that. But before we get into that, we'll also be sharing some of the principles that we at Uloy follow to create learning experiences, to give you a glimpse of what are these skills or what are these principles that you'll be learning through the program. And we'll also do a quick demo at for a chatbot that like use case that we recently worked on. So I guess quickly going through the specifics of the program, we are looking at 6 weeks of engagement with around 4 to 7 organizations. The program is completely virtual, so all the sessions will happen on Zoom, and it will consist of certain learning sessions and working sessions. We'll go deeper into this, and the focus of the program will very much be on tangible outcomes. So this is not like an online course where you come in and we share some knowledge and that is it. We'll be collaborating with each and organizations joining to really work with them and help them work on the challenges and the gaps that they're facing with the chatbots. Um, but also before going into the program and these principles that I'm talking about, I guess at this point I want to invite Abhishek from the Glific team to talk a little bit about Glific and also this program and why we are offering it. So Abhishek.
Awesome. Thanks, Arav. Hey, everyone. I believe many of you already know what Glific is. It's a two-way communication platform, majorly built on WhatsApp business API to get you in touch with your beneficiaries and help you deliver, the programs to the end mile. Um, Different kinds of programs, mainly learner-based, or if you were, transmitting any information to your beneficiaries. Right. So those programs are really excellent and a great fit for Glyphic. Um, and I believe, so from a Glyphic perspective, uh, and from a technology lens, while we enable you all with this technology solution, we feel that a dedicated effort, from your team side in building the conversations and making the program really, really relevant for your end users is key to succeeding with such a platform, right? And so in our effort to like build an ecosystem where we can help these programs prosper, do better, really make a great impact on the ground, we're partnering with like Glific, Ulai, we're partnering together to offer this program to all of the Glyphic using NGOs, or if somebody wants to use in the near future, that you reach, learn about your intent of the end user, really get close in touch with what, how you can solve the problems with for them, and design conversations effectively so that you can reach maximum impact. Because I mean, as you would realize, technology alone is not the solution, but in combination with impactful programs, it can really change the way that you deliver services to your to your beneficiaries.
Yeah.
And this is where this program comes in.
Okay.
Over to you.
Thanks so much, Abhishek. Yeah. So moving forward from what Abhishek said, I think we ourselves were exposed to Glific and the work that they were doing quite recently in the last 1 year. Prior to that, we've been working heavily with learning experiences, but in several different contexts and with other partners like Quest Alliance, who's been a consistent partner. But other than that, FMCH, and there's Argyam as well as INREM. And all of these learning experiences that we've been crafting have been very specifically with a specific user and a context in mind. We also realized that the formats themselves are very powerful. So even say WhatsApp Business API, the way Glyfic is using it, is extremely powerful to be able to put your content across. But if that content is not designed keeping that user and their context in mind, many a times you end up alienating them just by an excess of content, or just by not really understanding the very specific sensitive scenarios that they're existing in, right? So of course, the importance of user-centered design is central to this program, as well as to the work that Uloi does within the learning experiences vertical. We also focus a lot on the benefits of an iterative process, and that is something that I think would benefit many of the organizations that would be coming into this program. An iterative process can work right from the start, where like your research itself can be a form of iteration, which, as we'll show you with the Quest chatbot itself, it is layers and layers of iteration, because I mean, you'd go in with a certain understanding of, like, say, design thinking and problem solving in mind, but user-centered design is just a slight offshoot from what your regular design thinking practices are, because you don't define the problem, the user and their context define the problem, and accordingly, many a times what you think is a problem is not really a problem, and that's a very important thing to keep in mind. So yeah, we can move forward to the next. So some of the aspects of user-centered design that we focus on in this program, as well as in our work, one is a very research-driven approach right from the start itself. Two is engaging content writing, trying to understand the context of the user and being able to mold the content, not just structurally, but also in the tone of it, to be able to make it as relevant to the users as possible. User-friendly features is more to do with accessibility. I think accessibility again becomes not just a part of content or research, but it's a very it's something that comes very close to understanding the format that you're using. So whether it's WhatsApp Business API and working within the constraints that it offers, or in previous experiences that we've had, it could be even a slide deck, right? Like, how do you make a slide deck or a presentation accessible to the people in your audience is something that falls under this question. Testing and iteration, of course, I mentioned the importance of that. And very, very importantly, a holistic program design, right? Like, you need the entirety of all of these interventions to fit within a program that can support your learners, or alternatively, you can call them users, for a much longer duration of time, and allow them to have, like, a more wholesome growth through their exposure to the content.
Yeah. So so we want to go deeper into these principles and these aspects because they form the basis of everything that will happen in the program. But we also wanted to do this through a case study of a chatbot that we've been working on quite recently with Quest Alliance.
Yeah.
So just to give some context as to what this project is about, we started working with Quest Alliance sometime last year to create this chatbot to teach computational thinking to high school students in Orissa. So the idea was that you introduce a coding curriculum to students using a chatbot as the interface, and um, you you use the chatbot to develop certain mental models around how to do coding and the certain aspects of computational thinking. And the target audience was very much on semi-urban, rural areas.
Yeah.
So we'll quickly see a demo of what the chatbot looks like, and then we'll talk over some of these principles and the aspects that we've been talking about. Just let me know if the screen share is okay for the video, because I'm not. Is this good? Okay.
It's
Yeah,
visible.
it's working.
Yeah, I'll start over. Yeah. So as you can see here, we start by taking in some initial information. So what language do we want to converse in? And also at every point wherever we are taking crucial information, we confirm whether you want to proceed in this language or not. The experience starts with setting a narrative of a place called Unadpuri, where we are using the story of a robot who uses computational thinking concepts to to help people in this village called Unadpuri. Um, Again, taking in user input and then confirming, because we saw that many of these, while we are doing a research, we saw that many of these students would type things like "my name is Saurav," so that would get reflected everywhere throughout the chatbot. So just confirming that, am I saying your name correct? Also making the whole interaction more conversational.
I think some of these things, whoever's using the Glyphic chatbot, you would already know parts of the procedure, right? Like the opt-in, getting their names, all of that. The things that we'd like you to focus on, and we'll emphasize them, are just the smaller changes that you do to an already existing flow, which can make it more accessible, right, to the users themselves. Right. So this was one of the first couple of activities and exercises that we played with. We were also learning to use the limitations of what the WhatsApp Business API could provide to be able to create these, like, really interesting puzzles and games and all of that, which was mind-boggling for us initially. But it's quite possible to do it. And of course, this is very specifically to an education use case scenario where you're trying to think of all of these ways of engagement. But that can, I mean, honestly, these are principles and methods that you can apply to any other form of content as well. Yeah. You'll also notice the use of stickers very often, and we'll emphasize that later, why exactly we decided to use stickers instead of images. But anyway, that's the demo of the chatbot. And it's a very short one. In case anybody is keen on a longer demo, you can just get in touch with us personally, and we can take you through a slightly longer demo. Right.
Just a second. Okay.
So as we mentioned, the usual protocol is exactly what we said was a user-centered approach. We begin with a research-driven approach, and then the rest of the steps after that. The steps aren't necessarily linear every time. We switch it based on what is best and most suitable for the project. I have a feeling a lot of the organizations that are here are already doing some of these things, maybe not naming them as such. What we're keen on also focusing on is that how do they fit well into the workflow, and how best can they derive results and impact, right? So the first step that we followed in our process was a research-driven approach. The idea is to just dig deeper. For us, the users were students who were ranging from classes 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th, so 4 different grades. The important questions that we had to ask, as well as generally would be good to ask in the case of a chatbot, is how comfortable are the users with technology? How much access do they have to mobile phones, data, even just tech in general? For us, it was also important to ask the question that like how accessible are computers to the students, right? Like, is it okay for us to teach them computational thinking and then not have anybody, neither their teachers nor their parents nor anyone else around them, be able to help them with any other steps that they have to take after that? What are the languages that they are most comfortable speaking and reading in, right? There sometimes by our, like through our experience, we've also realized that even if they are comfortable speaking in, say, a Hindi or a more regional language, in reading and learning, there's a lot more comfort with, say, the technical words being reflected in English, and that completely dictates your translation strategy. So all of these things are very important for you to be able to really create the footholds on which, like, you're able to climb into a better understanding of the entire context and the users themselves. Looking forward. You have anything to add?
Yeah, so just adding to that, I think you'll notice that we, for every principles, we always have a set of questions that we are constantly asking ourselves. And I guess this, and again, we at Ulay are a curious lot, so that this whole approach comes to us quite naturally. But this is one of the things that we want to emphasize through the program as well. That being inquisitive, asking the right questions will really help you find those points that can enhance your chatbot experience for the users. Also, one more thing that we sort of do in our research is we always try to have an artifact that we show or give to our users for them to play around. Because by observing that itself, we learn a lot of things around what are the gaps that the users are facing, what are the areas that we need to work on. So even for this project, we had like a initial chatbot which was built by the team at Quest, which really helped us see the points where our users were struggling with using a WhatsApp chatbot, because users look at WhatsApp as a text messaging tool and not exactly an app where you can learn things. So some of the gaps which were existing there in terms of how do I interact with this chatbot, or how do I engage with this content, really got revealed to us as we saw them playing through this initial chatbot. And I guess I also want to talk about the process that we follow for research. So along with having conversations, we really try to have activities, um, uh, have activities which really help us, wherein we really try to allow the users lower their guard and really share with us and have an open and honest conversations about their aspirations, their beliefs, their behaviors, and things like that.
Yeah, something we had heard in the sprint as well was I forgot who it was, but I think it was from Dost Education. So they were saying that many a times you go to the field and you say ki aapko kya acha laga, and like you show them different things, and everyone's just like sab badhiya hai, everything is great and there's no problem with anything at all. And sometimes we realize that it's not in the asking, but in a combined effort of working together, right? Like where you're able to observe responses. And this is not just with working with students as we did. I think generally to understand users better, to be able to take an artifact and observe interactions amongst themselves to the artifact itself. I think for us, a lot of the gauge around their reception of the chatbot came from these smaller interactions that took place amongst us and the students, and within the students themselves. So yeah, part of the learnings, I think we just dive, I mean, not too deep, we'll just take you through a couple of the learnings that came out of this research. One was the emphasis that we had to put onto the existing relationship that these students had with WhatsApp. Not all the students had a phone, and mostly the boys had phones, unfortunately. Whoever did have phones, they were used to using WhatsApp as just, as sort of said, a conversational interface. So for us to introduce like this vague element of a bot, right, who you're supposed to interact with, it's supposed to give you information, was not something that settled all that well. And so progressively, while we were working with the students, when we introduced the idea that, have you heard of a robot? And like, what if I tell you that there's a robot that would like to, like, talk to you on WhatsApp? The minute you give it an identity, it's a lot easier for the students to be able to position who they're speaking to And I don't know if this is something that reflects in the studies that the rest of the organizations here are doing, but that's what we felt. And so what we did was create this entity called IKI, who is basically the guide that takes you through the entire learning process. And that's mostly what the stickers that you keep seeing are. Another point of learning was basically, and something that we were really trying to understand, was their perception and their current relationship with technology itself, as well as what the aspirations of tech are. For us, it was a lot to do with just one is this identity of a robot. We didn't want to alienate the students by bringing in something as whatever strange as a robot in. At the same time, when we tried asking around, and a lot of the students seemed very comfortable with it, so they'd be very happy to draw the robot. A lot of them had mixed relationships. There was some relationships of subservience, some relationships where they were like, that the robots know everything, so they'll come in and start teaching classrooms. Lots of arguments between the students saying that, like, this is how it'll be, that is how it'll be. And so you glean a lot of your understanding on their comfort based on these conversations as well. A very important aspect of establishing the entire the experience itself was to was to establish the intent right from the start. I think if we went into vague activities that, like, the students have to do and they're not sure what is it building up to, right? The entire point is how is this relevant to me? And so right from the start, we had established maybe not all of the learning objectives, but we had established a story, and the intent was for you to help. You help the characters, you help this main character, help other characters. The idea is always contributing to a larger idea that you're building towards. It's not just random activities that are not leading anywhere, because it's also very helpless for somebody to just keep having to do activities and they come to you saying, Ki, now what? Like, there's a large complaint that we came across that users just drop off at the end of it because it doesn't seem relevant. What is attracting them to come back for another week of learning is this idea of relevance that is building up to something. Moving to content writing, Saurabh, do you want to take this?
Yeah, sure. So I guess content writing for us is always about how do we write our content and structure it in a way that it is engaging for our users. So some of the questions that we ask is how do I disperse or distribute my concepts across the flow so that the retention is better, the spread of the learning is better. We always ensure that we are not overwhelming our users with like a dump of information, but really how do you ease the users into the experience and into the information flow, and how do you use analogies and metaphors to make the concepts relevant, because understanding the understanding or comprehension really becomes better when the concepts are relevant, or when we use examples from their existing context and their background, and the cues to do these are always sort of described from the research that we do. Along with a good breakdown and structure of content, we also keep in mind things like what is the appropriate tone or what is the appropriate language language in which I talk to my users. So again, since this is a WhatsApp chatbots are conversational flows, this becomes a very important aspect. Again, how do we keep the knowledge relevant to the users? So what are the ideas and aspirations that are relevant to my learners? How can I take thematic ideas and thematic props from their context and background to contextualize the content and make it even more relevant and usable? To do this, before writing our content, we always define certain principles. So here it was friendly conversations in order to allow relationship building with the students. Because as Samad also mentioned, we wanted the identity of the chatbot to be almost like a friend, a friendly mentor who is going on this journey of computational thinking with you.
So another thing that came up even in the Glific sprint, we done a workshop with some other organizations, and we realized that the first few conversations that you start with new users, a lot of it is about building trust. And that is so crucial to be able to establish anything else that comes. You can have like 5 weeks, 10 weeks of content after that, but if you don't have that first week where you've established trust, that, like, you can trust me and I'm going to give you things that are relevant and like not overwhelming to you, it's pretty much a lost cause, I guess. Yeah, Saurabh, please go on.
Yeah. So following a certain translation strategy, so For example, we ensure that there are certain concepts in coding which cannot be translated to ODR. So keeping those intact or transliterating them whenever the content was translated. After every short interaction or activity, making sure that how is the content connected to the larger objective. So again, always bringing it back to the intent. And yeah, using engaging puzzles, activities, and games to like practice concepts. Again, the process, just a glimpse of the process that we follow. We use a lot of mind mapping tools like Miro and FigJam to do a broader breakdown of the content structure, and then we go in deeper into the content writing process. Yeah, user friendly features, another important aspect. So again, this is all about like how do we provide certain footholds and certain features which allow the users to navigate the experience in the case they are stuck. So for example, here we have a help menu which the users can access anytime they want to change their language or they have a question that they want to ask. At the end of experiences, if the user is still trying to engage, how do we inform that okay, the experience has ended for now, but we'll be back. So just giving those messages to ensure that they are not stuck.
And basically, some of these are just accessibility features that make sure that they don't feel stuck, right? Another thing that we realized in our research was that the way WhatsApp is designed, because it's a linear format where you just keep messaging, and in the case that anybody else is using the chatbot itself, you realize that if there is no escape or like, exit option, that I want to just stop this flow, how does a student not feel helpless in that kind of situation, right? So to always mention that you always have this way out. If you want to change the language, this is what you have to say. Or if there's just one word, help, and there is another menu that opens up, there has to be some kind of an accessibility feature that is provided. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess another thing we followed in this project was to ensure that we are not moving out of the WhatsApp interface at all. Because in our research, we found that sending them tutorial links or sending them to different apps to practice coding was really throwing them off, and like managing the navigation between different apps was also a little confusing.
Especially something like a YouTube link, which looks very benign. The minute they're out of WhatsApp, what is getting them back, right? Then the minute they've gone out to see a video, then you have to send a nudge or some kind of a reminder that come back, like, right. Devlina was asking if we can see how the help option works. We could just go back to the GIF that was shown in.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Devlina, I think it's shown in the GIF itself. I hope it's visible.
So I think this help feature is also something we are iterating on right now, which is the next point in our presentation. We are trying to see what are these questions that the students are asking, and then based on that, we'll figure how do we best provide support around if there is a common theme or common pattern around the questions being asked.
Right. So for example, out here, when they write help, there is a menu that comes up, and there's usually 3 options. Talk to a teacher is usually where they can send a message out. In fact, like this is somewhere where I'd like Abhishek to come in to talk about the NLP part of it. If you would like to contribute, Abhishek.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, in most of the cases, you can plan like a chatbot, with the responses that you expect, but there'll be some cases when, despite all of the prompts, you may not get the exact response. So like in this case, yes, exclamation, but they might say okay or something else. So I think in those cases, it's like just making sure that your responses are accepted to a wider range, and then beyond that, if you feel that there are also instances where students are, or your user base is responding outside of the scope of the chatbot, then you can use NLP. And I mean, we have the setup and the entire piece figured out. So if you have that as a problem for your chatbot, then you can discuss it with the Glific team at any point, and yeah.
Sure. Thanks so much. Devlina, I hope the GIF was enough. At this point, we can talk about the help option further. Right. Are there any other questions at this stage, or should we just proceed through and we'll open it up for questions in another 5 minutes?
Yeah, I guess let's get to the end of this and then we can look at all the questions together.
Sure.
Yeah. So testing and iteration. I think this is as simple as testing your product as regularly as possible and taking in feedback from your users and using that and bringing that back into your content. And how do you take that feedback to improve your experience for your users? So again, some questions we like to ask is, what are the aspects of the user experience that we need to understand better or we need to test? And as I mentioned, how do we modify and refine my content based on the feedback that we got such that it meets the needs of the users?
For our chatbot specifically, the first line of feedback came from the field staff. So the facilitators who were in the field, one is that we had brought them on board to do a lot of the translation work, because there's smaller aspects of just slang or things that words that are more easily relatable with that context specificity came directly from the facilitators themselves. And in fact, this feedback group, the screenshot that we have was mostly for quick, iteration on that front. That any small mistakes, glitches, something not working, you remove all those small niggles before you send it out for the first pilot or for the first larger user testing itself.
Yeah.
We can move forward. Right. So program design, I think it's like one of the biggest things that we usually work with is the fact that you have to listen to the teams on the ground. Similar to what we had mentioned before this, that we brought the facilitators on board to do parts of the translation. Similarly, the initial research calls had not just, we had gone to the field to do the research with the students, but a lot of the initial research calls were also with the facilitators to understand, just the comfort level, to understand the ecosystem within which the students are present. Some of these things are not very easily accessible to any of our at least for us as an organization, I can speak for us. Say with regards to the ecosystem of the parents or the school system, how accessible are is the internet in some places that we couldn't visit. The knowledge that already exists has to be tapped into. The other thing is that many a times we create some of these programs and even something like the chatbot. If the users or the stakeholders are having issues on the ground, how is it that the teams that are already supporting you can support the users in turn, right? How are you onboarding them into this process of support that it can be a kind of a cascade effect of sorts. So that is another important aspect of program design.
Yeah. I think at this point, we would like to talk about the program, but before jumping into that, just opening it out to everyone to ask any questions that you have or share any thoughts or feelings that you have at this point. And we hope that this helped you sort of visualize what are these principles that we'll be sort of focusing on in our program. So yeah, just stopping my screen share for a minute. Yeah. So I guess just feel free to unmute, ask questions, or if you want, you can leave your question on the chat itself and we will take it from there.
Hey, hi Saurav, this is Abhijit calling from Omid.
Hi Abhijit.
Hey, I just have a couple of questions. I'm new to this overall thing. Okay, so it may sound a dumb question, okay? But first, my request would be definitely a longer demo, right? As someone had mentioned. So definitely, I would like to just go for a longer demo as per your availability, right? So I would request for that. Secondly, I would like to just talk about the security of this particular data, whatever data is being shared as a part of this chatbot, right? How we can just make that secure, and because I'm not sure whether all of this data can be downloaded on their local phones basically, right? And it will be access to them. So is there something which we can do which cannot be downloadable if required?
I think there's already a system in place for that. Abhishek would be the best person because Glific is the main system that's operating on for the entire chatbot. We're just doing the in between with the user centricity.
And, yeah,
Abhishek?
and this question may come actually in detailed discussion as well, but instead of taking a time right now, if you want to answer it afterwards, I'm fine with that as well.
Yeah, I think would we prefer that? That would be ideal then.
Exactly, because that may lead to a follow-up question as well, right?
Great, yeah. So then let's just get to this at the end of the entire
Unless anybody else also has that question.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Then Abhijit, we can take
Is
it.
there anybody?
I think I think we can take all the questions. And at this point, I would also like to invite like other my colleagues at Ulay, Yasna, Akshay, to also add in wherever you can. But Abhishek, if you would like to take this question right now and answer Abhijit's question.
Abhijit, I think it will also be useful if you can share where is this concern coming from in terms of what data are you talking about that shouldn't be downloadable or something of that kind that will help us also draft that answer better.
There could be two scenarios, right? One could be in data, actually, whatever we have, or users or customers, I would say in this particular case, right? If they are just, we have some kind of their data, or let me just take in this other way, okay? Suppose if I am just giving some kind of a training for some kind of a therapy, let's say, right? That's the content owned by the NGO, right? And which shouldn't be just readily available actually anywhere else, or it shouldn't be lying down anywhere else. It can be seen, right? But it can be seen by the authorized people only. So if this is the case actually, so can we just make sure that it would be available on the web only, right? And it may not be downloadable on the local devices.
Abhijit, in that case, I don't think WhatsApp will be the best solution, because as a WhatsApp chatbot, whatever you have on there is more or less the public data. It's like YouTube repository, you're hosting it, and any user who accesses the chatbot can access it. We've tried to think of some ways, but I don't think that just makes the whole experience very complicated when you want to kind of get some unique code and then give access to that. Unless you have a very, very strong proposition and use case and community, I don't think that will be a very easy to use solution.
So in general, can I just make this statement and you can correct me, right? In general, can I say that whatever media I would be just sharing on this chatbot, right, would be available publicly, and anybody would be able to store that anywhere and can use that?
That is correct.
Okay. Second question, in terms of the ownership of this particular data. So this data would be available definitely to the WhatsApp, right? Because they are just having this product. So it would just go and reside in.
No.
Okay.
So you can refer to WhatsApp's policies on data encryption and privacy. And I believe you've seen all these recent ads also on WhatsApp that all of the messages, all of the content is encrypted. So it's only between you and your user, as per what they're saying, basically. And I guess if you have to reach on WhatsApp, you have to believe that policy. I think that's,
Okay, surely. Thanks, Abhishek, on that. And then I have one question on the translation of languages, basically, right? So do we have any limitation on that? So let's say, suppose if I have one video actually, right? Which is available in multiple languages. Okay, for one problem, let's say there is a problem one. For that, the solution is in all like 20 or 27 languages, basically. So based on the language selected by user, I want to just send the respective video to him. Okay. So, and then there would be a couple of questions which would be asked. Okay. Based on that video. Okay. So those questions would be in that specific language. So do we have any limitation on that such in the language translation and accepting responses in those languages? Are you clear on that?
Yeah, no limitations as such.
So I can just use all of the languages which are available as of now. I will speak for India, right? So whatever WhatsApp support, basically, right?
Exactly.
You can use that.
Okay.
That's correct.
Yeah. So
I guess we could just take a pause on the questions here. I'm sorry. I'd just be keen on opening this up for another 2 minutes in case anybody else has any experiences that they'd like to share based on what we shared right now, before we move forward to explaining the program, or in the case that it seems extremely relevant, please feel free to unmute and share your experience with us.
Yeah, it would be always helpful if everybody talks about, or anybody talks about an security aspects, basically, because that's the major thing, right? Everybody wants to understand and wants.
Yeah, Abhijit, I think we can do a separate call on this, the Glific team with us. I think if Saurav Samarth, it's okay, we can move to the other segment, which is the program.
Yeah.
Then we can take more questions, because depending on that will be really.
Absolutely, Yashna.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for the time check, Yashna. I'll just share my screen again. But again, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and everyone else can try to like sort of answer that. Abhishek, Yashna. So yeah, okay. Coming back to the program. The program we are partner, as we mentioned at the start of the webinar, we are partnering with Glific to offer this program on creating learning experiences using the Glific Chatbot. Yeah, okay. So what this program is, right? We in this program we'll be working individually, and we'll be working with every organization who joins to really understand. Sorry, I'm hearing some disturbance. Is it my audio or?
I can't hear anything, sorry. Yashna, is there anything?
Nothing, I can't hear.
Okay.
Samarth, would you like to continue till I figure this?
Yeah, I'll just take over to you for that. So the program that we're hoping to introduce to everyone here, the first thing, of course, we're diving deep into the principles that we shared with you, and very specifically with the use cases that y'all are working with. All of the organizations present here are working with very diverse use cases. It's not necessarily learner-centric. Many a times it's just user-centric design, which, I mean, it might require some very basic interventions to existing workflows, right? You'll already have processes and workflows in place. The collaboration that we're hoping for is also amongst a larger cohort. So how can we work together to create some kind of, I mean, you could call it institutional memory or some kind of a system by which we're not reinventing the wheel, and just learning off one another's processes and workflows to be able to build each of our chatbots to a stronger version of what they already are. It's also something that we really want to focus on in this program is to improve the conversational flows in the chatbot, and to have just better engagement with the users that you all are currently working with. Sort of, if we can move to the next slide. The program is very specifically designed for NGOs and social enterprises that are already using the Glific chatbot. So in the case that there's a new a new organization that would like to come on board, I think it would be better if you all have this conversation with Abhishek first. For the rest of the organizations that are already within the Glific ecosystem, we're really keen on improving these aspects of relevance that your content has, and how best can we scale your programs using the Glific chatbot. We are also keen that any of the organizations that are applying, we'd want to have that conversation with you to be able to understand what are you aiming to do with the chatbot, what are your objectives and aspirations, based on which we'd like to craft the entire program to suit you as well as the rest of the cohort's needs, considering what we spoke about, that everyone should be working together to learn as a cohesive whole. The outcomes that we're focusing on, of course, firstly is using these learner-centered design principles to make the content accessible. Secondly, to have a better mapping of the program as well as the stakeholders. Thirdly, the existing content that you have, how best can we tune the narrative and the voice of the chatbot? So similar to the experience that we had, how can we conduct a little bit of research, a little bit of iteration and testing to really be able to get that right tone of voice, based, like, just as an example, sometimes you would want the tone of voice of your chatbot to be more instructive. Sometimes, like, it's almost like they're learning with the users themselves. Sometimes it's almost as though you're trying to convince the user that you are training the chatbot, and there's like a diverse set of tones of voice and narratives that you can use in these settings. Fourthly, there are really interesting ways in which we can do check for understandings, not just to collect data, but also to just understand user engagement and to better improve the chatbot itself, right? So how can we use interactive assessment methods to be able to do this? The fifth point in this case is to use versatile content. The WhatsApp Business API provides, I mean, there are constraints, of course, but there's a lot of formats that are already available. How best can we leverage those to be able to work for the content that you have? And of course, the thing that we've been saying at least 100 times already, user testing and quick iteration, and how best to incorporate the feedback that you're getting from these processes. And those are the outcomes that we're looking at. Of course, these are just preliminary outcomes that we're thinking of. The more conversations we have with the organizations that are interested, I think we can expand on these or even tweak these based on what your needs are. Currently, there is, of course, a selection process. We can't take in too many organizations because if we're working as a cohort, everyone's learning together and working together. We're looking at around 6 to 7 organizations with very specific use cases. So we're hoping that you could, I mean, if the organizations that are interested fill out the form by around the 7th of Feb, we will be doing an initial screening and scoping call to be able to understand whether this can be designed for you, whether this is best suited for you, or in the case that we can support you in any other way to be able to improve your chatbot outside the scope of this program itself. We'd be happy to have that conversation as well. That is the intent of the screening and scoping call. And of course, finalizing the cohort of these 5 to 7 organizations that we're hoping to work with, as well as finalizing the content that we'll be delivering right through the course of these 6 weeks.
Yeah, I guess just one thing which I would like to add here for the selection process is that since we are looking to provide personalized support to each organization, we are coming in with certain experience. We are also want to ensure that there's a use case match with every organization. So I guess that's what the selection process will be mostly about.
Right.
So in terms of the program structure, like we mentioned earlier, the program will be completely virtual, but there are different formats that we'll be using. So first, once the cohort is finalized, we'll do initial workshops with each organization, and we'll have 2 members from each organization who can join the program. So we'll be doing initial workshops with the organizations to understand the current challenges and gaps in the chatbots and their programs, and to come up with defined areas and outcomes that we will be working towards throughout this program. Second is there will be some learning sessions. So these will be group sessions which will be open to all organizations, and we'll be talking and discussing in detail about these techniques and these principles that we have been talking about in this webinar, which we will be using to design more user-centered chatbots. Third is we'll have some working sessions. So these sessions will be more collaborative, where the Oloi team and the organizations will work together to apply these learnings into their current flows and work towards the outcomes that we have defined. Yeah. And the last is, again, quick iteration and testing. So we have spoken about this enough. So I'll just go to the next slide. Formats, virtual sessions via Zoom for 2 members per organization. There will be around 4 to 6 modules. And each of these will run for approximately a week to 10 days, which will, again, depending on the topic, the number of days will vary. And mixed sessions. So like I mentioned in the previous slide, there will be learning sessions, group sessions. We'll also have some material share outs and references which the organizations can use. And we'll also provide some officers to provide one-on-one support to the members and to the organizations to answer any queries or provide any support which is required. And I think the last thing about the program is the pricing. So the initial pricing for 2 participants per organization was coming out to 2,33,000, but I think Tech4Dev really believes in this design thinking process and this approach, and we, Ulo and Tech4Dev, really think that this can help organizations elevate the work they're doing. So Tech4Dev is supporting all the organizations with special price, which is coming down to 1,40,184 rupees, which is inclusive of 18% GST. So that's what the costing of the program looks like per organization.
It's also, I mean, I'd like to mention some aspects of this are obviously dependent on the calls that we have initially. So even this 2-participant cap, in the case that you have a team that needs, like, say another member to come in because you have their production team, we'd be very happy to have those conversations. But I guess we need to just start somewhere. So yeah, we'd be very, very keen to start these conversations with any of the organizations that are interested in participating. We'll be attaching a link to the registration form in the chat. So please feel free to just get in touch with us.
And I think just one last point to mention here is that this registration form is also again for us to understand the kind of the place where the organizations are at with the chatbots, and really help us do that scoping better. So you'll see the questions will be asked accordingly in the form. So please fill them out in as much detail as you can, because that will help us design the program better. So that was the last thing. I'll just share this link in the chat, and I think
we can open up for questions then. I'd be very keen on hearing from organizations that are already using the Glific Chatbot, even if it's just generally about, like, your thoughts on some of these principles, anything that you're immediately feeling right now about whether this is relevant, how is this relevant. Please feel free to chime in right now.
Hi, this is Kalandi. I'm from Key Education Foundation. And hi, Samarth. Hi, Saurav, Yashna, everybody. Thanks for taking us through this. So we had a discussion with the Uloi team last week also. And something that I was even reflecting with my team members who are also a part of this call right now was that this was a very interesting way for us to improve our flows, because already our flow has been functional for the better part of last year. We rolled out sometime in May, and we are sitting on a ton of feedback from our program teams, or some from our very little from our users, but mostly from our program teams or teachers in schools who are helping us run this program, or our own reflections. But at the same time, we have ideas of what we want to implement. But this actually, the chatbot that you all had shared gave us a very good way to visualize what is possible. I was really keen on understanding what this program is like, and so we can get closer to our ideal flows on the chatbot. So what I also wanted to ask you was this one-on-one support, right? How's that going to work out? Because like you all already said, that every organization might have a different use case, and if we are learning with each other in a group, but the use cases don't align, or even if the development time cycles, for example, doesn't align within the organizations, then what do you think we could do? To just make sure we get to our improved flows and all, irrespective of these challenges.
Go on, yes.
Asking that question, Kalandi, I think just to also say, while there are some aspects of it mentioned in the presentation, a part of it is going to be flexible depending on the journey, and very rightly said that what if it doesn't align with production cycles, don't align, and they will not to align. The idea that what is the necessary journey and what's the flexibility. So of course we'll align a few of the tangible outcomes. It will be very different in terms of the flows, which say key education as over is going to be different. The idea is not that we are trying to align, it's to say how can we learn from each other in that process. So the principles for sure are to align.
Got it.
Understood that from the kind of work that we're doing, it will follow a couple of principles. It's just like, how are you applying those principles in your journey versus other organizations? There is a bit of learning there as well, but not necessarily saying that you have to work together with each other, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
I will come in that process. I think Samarth has to say something.
Yeah, I think it's also like in the initial scoping calls, we're definitely going to try making sure that the objective that we're trying to meet is not something that, like, we've given you some fundas and then you're going and doing it by yourself. We're going to try making sure that in those 6 weeks, there is one tangible outcome, which, because of that process of, like, working so closely, your team is capable enough to take it forward. And I think that initial scoping call is going to be very important for us to be able to really dictate what is it that we're fleshing out completely and what is it that we're keen on being able to support, like, beyond this as well. So it would be, I think that's where the crux of it would lie.
And that one tangible needn't be one. Basically, it will for different organizations. What is that?
Depending.
As you said, sitting on feedback. How can we prioritize? How can we learn from that? That these are something which we discussed in the call as well.
Got it.
This, yeah.
Thanks. That helps. Thank you.
Okay.
Anybody else who would like to share any thoughts that they have?
Hi, I had a question. Hello. So I wanted to understand, for Quest, I remember you guys went for user research, you interacted with the users and did some level of field work, right? In this entire process, if you see the need of some level of field work, how does that come into the picture?
Again, I can take it.
Yeah, go on.
So, Sushmita, basically with Quest, it was also a very intensive, longish process where we were starting from scratch. And I'm assuming, I think there's a fair bit of work which is already done with the work that you've put on the chatbot. It is also leveraging what is already done, helping organizations facilitate that process where we are here to guide. Maybe going to the field by us will not be there, but we'll enable people to go to the field. That process is necessary. Help guide some principles. What are the points that we need to take feedback on? How can we take feedback and come back and say, okay, these are some journey points that we want to define. These are some tangible outcomes we want to define based on this kind of feedback. Unless there is already those feedback points, like Alindi mentioned, they are sitting on a lot of feedback from field teams. Always be a session with the field team members also, which can be conducted as a part of that cohort itself. That what can we learn from them, which is not discovered already. I mean, that session could also be arranged through.
Yeah, I think it's also dependent on the resources that you already have at hand, like considering TAP and your network across, say, Maharashtra itself, we'd be keen on seeing within these sessions, how best are you able to tap into those two? I mean, like, even if we can't go, we can definitely help you come up with, say, a strategy or, like, trying to understand considering your current use case, what are the things you're trying to find out? We're more than happy to guide you in that process. But the scope of getting feedback is something that maybe TAP has to dictate during those sessions as well.
That's when collaborate. Come back. It'll be how can we also create some mechanisms to do this together, the time frame, at the same time learn from that feedback and some insight and to work on. Basically.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who would like to ask any other questions?
In case there are any questions, we can always take.
We can take one last question, and then any other broader questions that you all have, please feel free to drop them in the chat. And okay.
Super.
Okay, awesome. Cool. I guess we could wrap up the session there. I also requested people who are interested in having a longer demo shown to them to drop their emails. So feel free to do that right now. We'll be keeping the session open for another 3 minutes, I guess. So in case anyone wants to drop their email IDs, you can do that right now.
We'll also just share an email with the registration link and the recording if you want to register before. And if there are any questions, please write us back to that email. Be happy to take it after that.
Yeah. Thank you, Evelina. Thanks a lot for attending.